Welcome to the Chairisma podcast. I just finished a conversation with Artie Isaac, who is always stimulating. Artie has been a voice of simplicity and, dare I say it, poetry in sharing. I'm Francine Lasky, a former Vistage member and Chicago chair since 2019. I created this podcast because the wisdom within our chair community is too valuable to stay hidden in one-on-one conversations and once-a-year moments at Chair World. In his typical manner, Artie expresses non-traditional opinions and explains his minimalist chair stance in elegant words. We have an in-depth conversation about our chair stance in the room and how we as chairs can be less and add less value, letting the members create their own value. Don't miss my questions to Artie about how to get over the fear of letting go. I found fascinating how he positions himself in the room when he's letting the silence do the heavy lifting, and why he thinks aims are more powerful than goals. Let's begin. Good morning. Today we're with Artie Isaac. Welcome.
Thank you, Francine. It's good to be with you.
I want to start out today with a quick little get to know you exercise. So I'm going to ask you about two things and compare them. I don't believe that anybody is all one thing or all the other. So I'd like to know what your ratio is.
Let's go.
All right. Artie, dog or cat?
100% dog.
Paper book or reader? E-reader.
Paper book.
100%?
100%.
Sweet like ice cream or salty like French fries?
Oh, ice cream. 100%. I deal in absolutes. This is one thing your listeners will.
Obviously, you are not the ratio kind of guy. Memory like an elephant or memory like a goldfish?
I'm 90% goldfish.
Speak truth or maintain harmony?
Speak truth. 100%.
Process focused or outcome focused?
Process focused. 100%.
Time or money?
Time. 100%. But it's because I already have money.
All right, here's the hard one. You ready for this one?
Please.
What is your peanut butter to jelly ratio?
That's interesting. I think I'm largely peanut butter, 85%.
So the only thing that you're not 100% sure on is the peanut butter or the jelly. We're just going to get right into our questions today. And I'm going to start out with the question, why do you do this work?
This work is as a chair. I do
as
it.
A chair.
You know, it's changed as I've been at it. This is my 13th year. And I did it initially because I didn't know what else to do. And I thought I'd be good at it. And then I did it for about 5 years because I found it to be surprising because people would tell me the truth and they would confide. And I found that to be ego gratifying. But in the past, I guess the most recent 10 years, I keep doing it because it's in some ways the path of least resistance. It grows on its own. It puts to work the three skills I have, and I'm glad to finally in my career be in a place where my skills are put to good use.
So I'll follow up with, what are those three skills?
I learned in high school how to write and improvise and cheerlead. And those are the three things that I do. I write, I believe there's meaning in words, and so I listen for story. And I improvise. I don't plan. I don't research. I don't get ready beyond breath work and understanding who I am, who we are, and cheerleading. I'm an old-fashioned encourager. And so those three skills are ideally put to work in this work.
Where do you find the writing most important in sharing?
It helps me to say less and to be smaller in the room. If I can write my members in advance and answer any questions that I would have them ask me in my meetings, then I don't have to talk in the meetings. I believe that the first role of a chair is to get out of the way, and writing helps me to do that because I'm willing to let my writing represent me.
So your writing is kind of the next chair in the room, right? Like
Well, it was the one that attended the meeting before the meeting. It was the one that I write them in advance. I don't roll out the writing during the meeting, but in advance, I write all my members.
Do you think that there's kind of a tension there between being improvisational and the writing for preparing. Like those seem to me to be two sides of that coin.
Francine, I think that's astute. I believe that writing in advance gives me the structure and the preface in order to then improvise freely. I don't have a compulsion to say anything because it's already been written, and I can improvise without.
Does it also help you to be present because you've already gotten all those things kind of out?
Right.
I'm a
Right.
big proponent of, when things are kind of clogging your head, get them out writing, and then it allows you to really kind of be present. I think it's a lesson I'm still learning as a chair. But
Sure, me too.
It's a good way to think of it for sure.
Yeah.
What would you say? What would your members say is your superpower?
I think that they appreciate that I have a very short distance in time between my being confused and my saying a question that reveals my confusion. I learned a long time ago not to be embarrassed by my ignorance, and I've gotten really good at that. And so, as fast as there is a moment of bafflement in the room, I'm the one and it could be something small like, am I the only one that's bored right now? Should we move on? Or it could be something of more substance. But I think they appreciate that I demonstrate. We're all trying to demonstrate our competence. I demonstrate my competence by revealing my incompetence.
Do you ever get a negative consequence to that?
Probably. I mean, it helps that my demographics are very forgiving, and I'm able to speak in bafflement and look wise or transparent or candid, rather than people with other demographics who might look ill prepared or like the fool on the hill. I get away with when I speak of the demographic, I mean my own personal characteristics, the being white, male, affluent. I'm speaking of that. It plays pretty broadly as long as I am culturally humble. I think that is an aspect of chair wisdom. It comes with time, generally, that we realize we don't have to work as hard. We are not the creators of value. And once we can let go of our being the source of value, this work is really easy. A lot of chairs work too hard.
Tell me more about that. That's something that you tend to represent when I see you at Chair World, and it's always the do less is more. Tell me what, for a beginning chair, let's start with a beginning chair. And I'd like to take it so we do a beginning chair, a chair in the middle, and a chair towards the end of their career. What advice would you give them for doing less, which is what you usually say?
Well, a beginning chair ought to follow the training. The training is strong, and beginning chair does not need to experiment with their own methods early on, because there's no tediousness, there's no boredom. We're handed a lot of the goods. And so I would say the initial 5 years, I benefited from delivering all the aspects of Vistage that Vistage promoted. I don't think a beginning chair should be doing less. I think that they would miss out on the learning that happens when they do more. The middle is where the opportunities to experiment with doing less. I've had a couple of methods. One is I work with an admin, and it was after I got my first 4 groups, and I had to do something. I couldn't keep delivering everything, and so we use like lean manufacturing philosophy. If there's anything that we're doing repeatedly that we can take 2 or more seconds of work out of, we stop doing it and find out, does it diminish our standard of excellence? And if not, well, we just stop doing that. So we're constantly looking at what are we doing that doesn't need to be done. That middle of chairing is a chance to experiment with triads and to become less in the room. Start having day chairs, have the members lead the meetings. They're great. And I think I'm in that third of chairing, although I hope this lasts for a good long time because I really do enjoy this. But I believe that I don't need to be in the room. I don't do one-to-ones. I haven't for years now. Once in a while, someone will call. and they'll say, gosh, my vice president of sales just quit. And I'll say, oh, Francine, that sounds terrible. Which member of the group should you be talking to? Rather than talking to me, why would you talk to me? I don't know how to do that. You bought peer influence. Let's get you in front of peers. And so I think that middle third is where some chairs, I found that there was suddenly a split between being a mentor and being a coach and being a chair and being a therapist and being a consultant and being a teacher. I started to realize there are different hats and that I need to know which hat I'm wearing. And the hat of chair does very little. It's really just an organizer of the table. And I don't even do that. I don't put out place cards where people are supposed to do it. I think that the third is where we can really reckon with the idea that we aren't that necessary. Vistage has been designed to serve members. Absolutely. It has also been designed to help chairs feel valuable. And once that's no longer needed, there's a lot less work to do because members are well served by Vistage, even if the chair is mute.
For a chair that was considering doing that, but has the fear,
Sure.
The chair that goes, well, what do they need me for? What would you answer?
Let me pause for a second because the question deserves one way to approach this with members in a way that is not scary, that, gosh, I might not be necessary here, is to announce it as an experiment. I have found I can try anything with my members as long as I say, let's do an experiment. I'm going to, and then I insert my ridiculous proposal. And then I say, and that'll be an experiment. We'll trap this data. And because you're a bunch of complainers, I'm sure you'll let me know, what you don't like. And one thing we could do is I'm going to try to be less in the room so you all can be more. There was a moment where I found this out. I was in one of my own group meetings. I was chairing it. And someone said, has anyone seen Artie lately? And I was in the room. I was, someone said he's over there. And I was sitting in the corner on the floor. And I waved. And they waved back at me. And then they started working again. The uncomfortable fact is they don't need us. What they need is themselves together in conversation. If the chair is needed, something's gone terribly wrong.
Insightful. Yeah. I think the best days, and I will put that as outcome, process, but the best days are the days where I don't say anything. The best one-on-ones, the ones where I don't say anything, like where they help each other or help themselves, which I think is really.
I was trained with just a great class of aspiring chairs, and one was named Jim Jelinek, and no longer a chair. I went to visit him at one point, and I sat through a meeting, and after he said, okay, friends, it's 8:30, let's get started. The next thing he said was lunch. And I've observed with some really great mentors in the chair world, you don't seem to do much. And Al Stempel at one point said, chairing is a minimalist profession. And I think that scares, it scared me. I can't speak for other chairs. I think it scares a chair whose identity is based on being wise or daddy or the answer person.
The smartest one in the room. Yeah.
Yeah, the center of the table. I've never been a tycoon. I can't tell you how to be a tycoon. You wouldn't come to me to learn business.
So let me ask you this. We've talked about facilitation skills. So you may be only saying good morning, lunchtime, time to go. What's going on in your head? It's not that you're not doing work. It's not that you're not paying attention. What are you doing if you're not speaking?
Well, okay. So first of all, let me dispense with the fraud that I created, this idea that I'm not doing anything or not speaking. I am an uncontrollable raw nerve of an ego in the room. There's no question about it. I am trying to entertain. I'm trying to. No, I've not gotten the best of this. I'm describing my aspiration. What I am doing is two things. I am constantly measuring member-to-member communication as a ratio versus chair-to-member or member-to-chair. So when a member speaks to another member, a little, piece of sand on the apothecary scale on the good, weighs in. And whenever someone speaks to me or I speak to them, grain of sand goes on the other. I am trying to maximize member-to-member interaction. So that's going on. And then beyond that, I'm everything I say, I am trying to ask myself before I say it, would the world be better off if I don't?
When you do those member-to-member interactions, do you have what do you use? What's in your toolbox when you use it? What are the things you draw out, the screwdriver, the hammer, the whatever, in order to facilitate? It's not controlling them, but it's to help the magnetism happen.
It's allowing silence. It's not rescuing myself from what I think is the awkwardness of silence. They will talk to each other if I get out of the way. And so I don't have to do anything except move away. So some things, okay, there are some actual physical things I do. If someone is looking at me and talking, and often I'm on my feet, often I'm walking around the table. If someone looks at me, I will become invisible to them, not visible. I will either walk behind them, and there's a gendering caution that I have about walking behind people, so it sort of depends on how that feels for people. Or I will go to the other side of the room, so they have to look over everybody, and I will get low, like kneel down, behind somebody. Physically, they can't see me. And then they start talking to each other. I do that as early as Talk a Person when they're first there. I don't interview people for Talk a Person. I have members interview. I mean, I really try to get out of the way.
But physically. Literally, yeah.
Literally. We know from theater, from stage work, how to stay in the light. I do the opposite. I can leave the room at times. I take my breaks when they're meeting. They don't need me there. This is uncomfortable for a lot of chairs because we think, but my retention rates are really good. I don't know. I've got a robust membership and a portfolio of groups. Things are going well. And here's what I found out at one point, Francine. It's a return on investment calculation. I found that if I worked really hard, I would have a certain return. And it was great. And then I found out I couldn't make the return better. I couldn't do better. And so my ROI was stuck. I couldn't improve my ROI because I couldn't improve the outcomes. So what I decided is if I can't improve the outcomes, I can reduce the investment. And I started pulling back the amount of effort I was making. And now I'm doing less and less and less, and the outcomes are the same. That's the experiment that I guess I would encourage chairs to do. Listen, if a chair loves doing all the work, if it gives them a good feeling, well, that's great. I'd rather be writing poetry.
A lot to think about, right? To kind of, I love what you said about how the Vistage model works. It works with us and without us, right? Like that as chairs, we can trust the model and the vulnerability that we brought in.
I mean, one of the arguments I have with Mark Taylor, my friend and mentor, is that the climb to mastery is backwards. We start knowing a lot, in my impression, and we end knowing nothing. And we're of more value that way than we ever were.
Really interesting. Let's talk about the value for a second. What does standard excellence mean? Or really, how do you measure if you're doing a great job?
I think of this from a systems point of view. And my standard of excellence is to be marginally higher than the expectations of my members. I want to just marginally surpass their expectations. And so this means I have to do two things. One is I have to surpass their expectations. And two, I have to reduce their expectations. At all times, I am trying to tell my members to expect less from me, and they'll be more satisfied. And they think this is ridiculous. And I say, why aren't you doing that in your work?
Absolutely.
And so I'm trying to role model what I think is an allowance of other people's definition of success. So I'm not big on the word success because I think it's a goal. And I believe goals are counterproductive. They always have unintended consequences. So I prefer aim. For me, if what we're doing feels joyful and like work in a serious and playful way, then I would say, let's just keep doing.
And if it's not?
Let's change what we're doing. which you can't do with a goal orientation. You're stuck with the goal. My aim can change all the time. My aim in my work, you asked early on, why are you doing this? My aim has become to reduce needless suffering, and not as much in my members, except in as much as their needless suffering creates needless suffering in the people around them.
Mhm.
I'm in this not for my members. My members are going to be fine. They're going to be, they're smart, they're hardworking, they're going to be they're rich, or they're going to be there any minute now. They're going to be fine no matter what kind of dope I am. I am motivated by the people they inflict themselves on in their lives, where they create needless suffering in other people, home, in the community, certainly at work, even in the mirror. I want to train people to try to be the kind of influence on those around them that produces alignment and joy. And it's easy work.
Tell me why you think it's easy. Like, I completely agree with you. And you know, my why for this is I think we can make the world better one small business at a time. You can experiment when you make business leaders more their best selves, then they can be their best selves to all the people around them. And it's an exponential, right, growth. I can, by being the leader to 40 people, I can make the world a better place. And I truly believe in that. Louis Samuel from Montreal, I don't know if you know him, he was talking about his why is he wanted to make his community the best place to live, right? Which I think is beautiful. Like, if he can make business leaders some best selves, it makes the community better. But I don't think it's easy. Tell me why you think it's easy.
I think it's easy because the default condition of humanity is alignment with nature and alignment with the universe. And what we have done is we've created an educational system and a popular culture that creates suffering, the sense that I am not enough, the sense that I'm not competent, the sense that I am separate from everyone else. And this rugged individualism. Capitalism in and of itself is not a broken concept, but rugged individual capitalism is where we're creating a ridiculous amount of suffering, and ultimately it's unsuccessful. So I think it's easy because I'm not trying to teach anything new. I'm trying to help people recognize that they can unlearn a few things.
Interesting. What advice would you give to first-time or new chairs going to chair?
Best I've gotten out of chair world is at breakfast, where I see somebody sitting alone and I go and I sit with them. John Bruns, he's a chair in Perth, Australia. We just had a conversation last week. Lovely guy. And I remember he was sitting there and I said, are you a chair? And he said, yeah. And I said, can I join you? I think that's the great opportunity. What I do is I always skip all the big plenaries. I just walk in the hall and I look for the chair that is left because they're having a crisis. Because there's, in a group that large, somebody just got that phone call.
Yeah.
And I've met wonderful people and I sit with them and I say, do you want to do a one-to-one? I don't go to chair world for the big show. This is not interesting to me. What's interesting are the chairs. And so I like to take them to dinner. So that's the whole reason for being there.
Well, and I'm the beneficiary of that. So you saw me sitting alone in a chair and said, hey, you want to go to dinner? Not only was it a fabulous dinner, but we had a great discussion about health, which really changed my mind on a lot of things.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So we'll go from there. Tell me about something that I know you have a minimalist approach to your groups, but what's something that you do that's unique to you that another chair might want to copy, try, experiment? And maybe that's withdrawing. I think we've already talked about a couple of them, but I'll ask you for another one.
Well, I think it's not unique to me. And it's even odd that it would come up as my answer. But I'm a huge believer in plain vanilla issue processing. Well, here's one thing I do. We always have issues. They come up during a check-in. And I'm very careful with the first issue. Follow every rule in issue processing, separating the clarifying questions and on and on. And we sometimes, I kind of read them the instruction manual as we go. And then with the second issue, we lose our rigor. We lose our discipline, professionalism, and I let improvisation take over more. But I always start the first issue of every day always has a substantial issue, and it is always, we follow issue processing to a T. I do want to suggest that it is a neurosis, I believe, of groups to spend too long on the first issue. And so I also try to make sure that issue is relatively tight in the way we process it. I will say this is maybe in the category of tips and tricks. I learned this from someone else. If people are arriving late for meetings and that becomes a sort of a challenge, I mean, certainly I'd want to process it from the chair. I mean, I process issues with my group. They need to see me do that as well. If they walk in and someone's in the middle of showing their financials, that's awkward. And so I would start with the member spotlight if ever that's a challenge. Another thing, I don't drink with my members. I don't drink alcohol with my members. I'm not a teetotaler. I just, I know a chair that did all his one-to-ones with a scotch and a cigar. There are a lot of ways to do this work. I don't believe in alcohol and work mixing. And my Vistage work is my work. I don't stop them from having their fun, doing whatever they want to do.
Talk to me about your EA, so your executive assistant, and how you use others to help your chair.
When I got to 4 groups, I was full out. That was it for me. I was still doing one-to-ones, and another chair in my market was leaving the chair practice and had 2 groups that were going to be transferred. And I was chosen to have them transferred to me. It's great. But I realized I couldn't do it. So Monica, who I'd worked with in years past, Monica Leck, she and I, we had a trusting collaboration back in my former life. And I called her and I asked her to do scheduling for me. And she started scheduling, and I saved 90 minutes a day, roughly, in scheduling. You do the math. That's 375 hours a year. It's a lot. I can remember the first night I was sitting on the couch next to Elisa, my wife, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sitting on the couch." She said, "Usually you're working. What are you doing?" I said, "Did my work today." And it was because I wasn't scheduling. I have to watch out for a couple of things. If it looks imperial, I don't like that. I don't like looking like, "Hey, let me have my people call you." But I will tell people that it's a proven practice that I'm more likely to show up where I'm promised to be if Monica handles this, and that their time is too valuable. And if they don't have a schedule, maybe we should talk about that. About 6 months later, I asked Monica to answer all my email, and I saved another 90 minutes a day. I shared my screen and I emptied the inbox, narrating for her my biases. I'm biased in favor of this person, not this person, and I gave her the biases. And we discovered there were only about 6 types of messages. Already promised me something. Can I have it now? 3 or 4 other things. And then there's a last one, which was, Monica can't answer this. She puts those in a folder for me to attend to. That's supposed to be the only email I ever see. And there aren't that many of those. And I've heard all kinds of reasons why people won't give this work up. And they're good reasons. But for me, it was compelling to get my time back.
You talked a little bit about your wife. Tell me about your support system. You're a means of support for some people, right? I wouldn't say you're positioning yourself so that you're not their main support, but they're calling you to be cheerleader. You said that's one of your goals. Who cheerleads for you?
Well, I do get that here at home. Artie Isaac is very encouraging, not just with pats on the back, but also as a role model. She's a painter, and a musician, and a gardener, and a former nurse practitioner, a former industrial engineer, a former budget analyst. She's had a lot of careers and reads a lot. So I do get a lot of encouragement. Next, my dog. The dog is instrumental in. I mean, especially when people take an election hard, when people take the way of the world hard. Dog's very helpful. Dog needs to be played with and fed, and having a dog has been very joyful for me. Then I have a series of educations that I've enjoyed. My Jewish education is very helpful. My collegiate and my scholastic education, very helpful. I learned how to sit in rooms of smarter people and ask them questions. I learned to question authority early in my life, and that ends up being what we do, sometimes at our best. I've taken coursework from Juan Alvarez, who is a mindfulness coach, a former CEO, a brilliant, brilliant guy. I've taken 5 times a course called Creativity and Personal Mastery by a teacher named Sri Kumar Rao. Brilliant, brilliant educator. Where else? I mean, I meditate. This is the 50th year of my meditation practice. I'm a believer. I was 15. I'm a believer in meditation. What else? I take care of myself. The idea of not mixing alcohol with work isn't because I don't like my members and I don't want to drink with them. It's I have to cut alcohol out of something. It is bad for us in any quantity. And we know this. This is not news. So, and nutrition otherwise is important to me. And I've talked about good sleep. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea about 10 months ago, 11 months ago, and got a CPAP, and I would just recommend that to anybody who can possibly do it. So who cheerleads for me? I just sort of believe that, the universe is what the universe is. It's not benevolent. It's not malevolent. It's quite neutral. And I'm allowed to simply apply my.
You sound like you're so clear on your boundaries, right? I hear what you're telling me about the drinking, about the not going on business trips, about the standing back from your groups. How do you think you developed, or where did that come from to be able to set those boundaries? Because our members, lots of chairs, we all have difficulties with those. We think we're missing out on something if we don't set that boundary. Where do you think that comes from for you?
Well, I mean, I mentioned earlier, and I'll just reiterate for a moment, that working harder didn't have better outcomes. We believe, but this is just a belief, we believe that having goals, working hard, gets us what we want. And I guess I'm just here to question it. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that it has a lot more to do with who we know. It has a lot more to do with our ability to observe and to join people rather than compete with them. I don't think I discovered anything except that maybe it might look lazy or reckless to some other chairs. I've been called those, and maybe people are working too hard. We're the hardest working. The United States is the hardest working place in the world. I'm not sure that it has the outcomes we always want. We think it does because we were the only economy left standing after the war, but I think all this work is.
Well, I think you measure outcomes differently than a lot of people would. I think you measure them based on your own personal standards, based on a lot of things that you've mentioned here.
What else is there?
Rather than what society, social media, your friends, your neighborhood, your other Vistage members tell you it should.
Right. Well, you mentioned FOMO, the idea that I might be missing out on something. We are, by definition, missing out on more than we're having all the time. And so rather than wondering what I'm missing, when I was in my 20s, there was an advertisement. I think he was a banker, and I've longed to find this, and I can't. I've Googled, and I can't find it. But the headline, the banker was saying, we must not let the joy of losing rob us of the joy of, we must not let the fear of losing rob us of the joy of having. And I find that people generally, after a certain level of wealth, start to have certainly a declining incremental gains, but I believe it actually turns negative after a while. I think it becomes very frightening. I think maybe what chairs might want to spend some time doing is actually finding people who are happy. Who are the happiest people on earth? A great book is The Geography of Bliss by Eric Weiner. I read it 15 years ago. And he traveled as a radio correspondent, and whenever he went to a place on assignment, he measured happiness. He found a way to somehow measure the happiness, and then he looked for attributes. It isn't the pursuit of happiness isn't maybe how we're enacting it. I think that it makes sense for people to try to figure out what the phrase denial of death means to them. In what ways Are we trying to live forever and be fit and be forever to the point where we are denying death, which is an inevitability, and we're headed for a noisy one where we're shouting because the grandkids are backing away in horror, and we realize all at once we didn't really understand what this was about. Can't profess to know what this is about, but I am aiming for a quiet death. I have a poem I wrote relatively recently about how we're living 3/3 of a life. And the third is important, and in and of itself needs to not be the second third repeated.
Right.
I know people who are playing all out, working hard in a game they've already won. And I find that to be, it looks fearful. It doesn't look powerful. It looks fearful. And, we can look at our more elderly politicians and see that as well. They're playing a game they've already won or lost, but it's time to understand what the third of life is. So I guess I would invite people to do that.
Thanks so much, Artie. I appreciate it. Your perspective. I always appreciate that you're willing to take a different perspective. I have been the recipient of your generosity, and I thank you for it. You have enriched my life and actually reduced needless suffering in my life. So thank you very much for succeeding with me. And I appreciate your time today.
What an amazing conversation. I so share Artie's goal in helping people rethink and unlearn a couple of things. In true chair spirit, let's commit with a personal action summary. What did you learn? What opinion that Artie expressed is totally different than yours? But how did it make you think differently about how you lead your group? How can you maximize the ROI on your efforts? What are you spending lots of time on that's not leading to proportional outcomes? Artie shared with us that he's not traveling to Chair World this year. I plan to continue his tradition of finding someone I don't know and asking them to join an eclectic group for dinner. Will you do the same? And let's share this podcast on LinkedIn and start a discussion of how you plan to change any of your practices. You can find links and show notes at my website at francenelasky.com, including some of the ongoing learning resources that Artie mentioned. Who pulled a chair out for you? Whomever you value in the Vistage community, we want to hear their story. Nominate them by reaching out to me through my Vistage email. And then pass it on. Please share with chair friends about this podcast. If you subscribe or comment, it helps other chairs find us and strengthen our circle. With appreciation for the wisdom that we share, until next time, keep growing your chair impact.